Number 1. How did Southern Confederate leaders explain seceding or leaving from the Union? A. They claimed that the Magna Carta gave Southerners the right to revolt against an oppressive, bad government. C. They argued states' rights, that each state had voluntarily joined the Union. It had the right to leave the Union. D. They claimed that Article 8 of the Constitution clearly allowed for secession. Which of the following pairs of people would the best titles for the Venn diagram above? So, Union leader, reputation as a tough fighter, showed mercy after the South surrender, or Confederate leader, fought for Virginia, great military strategist. B. George McClellan and Stonewall Jackson. C. Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee. D. William Carney and Philip Bazar. Remember the controversy over Lee High School and why? All right, the passage here is secession belongs to a different class of remedies. It is to be justified upon the basis that the states are sovereign. There was a time when none denied it. I hope the time may come again when a better comprehension of the theory of our government and the inalienable rights of the people of the states will prevent anyone from denying that each state is a sovereign and thus may reclaim the grants which it has made to any agent whomsoever. Jefferson Davis said this. In the excerpt above, Jefferson Davis is explaining the secession of the South using which of the following ideas? A. States' rights. B. Freedom of speech and assembly. D. Separation of powers. Four. Which of the following was a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854? A. Fighting broke out between pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups in Kansas. B. Kansas entered the Union as a slave state through popular sovereignty in 1856. C. Nebraskan settlers who supported abolition moved to Kansas. Five. Why did the economies of Western territories develop so differently from the economies of the North, East, and South? A. Western territories had limited land and large immigrant population. B. Western territories had natural harbors and many navigable rivers. D. Western territories had cheap land and many natural resources. C. What geographical advantage did the Union win after the Confederates were defeated at the Battle of Vicksburg? A. Control of the Mississippi River and cut the South in half. C. The high ground of the Appalachian Mountains. And D. The complete blockade of the South. So for this one, look up at this map. See what's going through the map through here. 7. Why did the siege of Vicksburg affect the balance of power during the Civil War? A. Several important Confederate generals were killed. C. The Confederate South Territory was divided in half. D. Severe casualties were inflicted on Union forces. All right, 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here give their lives that the nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. We were highly resolved that the dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. This was said by Abraham Lincoln during the Gettysburg Address in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So according to the excerpt above, Lincoln felt that it was important that A, the Confederacy immediately surrender and lay down their weapons. B, people in the Union remember that the war was being fought for liberty, equality, and democracy. C, people donate money to help support Union troops and pay for medical care. Use your chart and the knowledge of social studies to answer the following question. So in 1860, the North had industries, cities, factories, and they did not want slavery. The South had agriculture or farming, rural areas, so not cities, few factories, and they were slaves. So what conclusion related to the Civil War can be drawn from the information in this chart? So did the South have more large cities than the North? B, sectionalism was based on social and economical differences. D, agriculture was no longer important to the United States. So look back up at the chart. And what caused the North and the South to be in sections? 10. Which description below correctly describes the social contributions of Frederick Douglass? A, African American abolitionist, writer, and speaker who escaped from slavery in the South and stirred Northern sentiment against its injustices. B, chief commander of the Southern Confederate forces during Civil War, who surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox. C, British commander during the American Revolution, who surrendered to George Washington at the Battle of Yorktown. 11. One advantage the Confederacy, or the South, had over the Union during the Civil War was that Confederate forces had B, a smaller number of military troops in reserve, C, an extensive railroad system for moving troops and supplies, D, knowledge of the land since most battles were fought in the South. So the South, where there's more land, where did they have the most benefit? So this chart is about Ulysses S. Grant. He graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He served in the Army during the U.S.-Mexican War. He served as the 18th President of the United States. And what are we missing here on the question mark for number 12? B, led the Radical Republicans in Congress during Reconstruction. C, was appointed General Chief of the Union, or the North, Army during the Civil War. Or D, became Andrew Johnson's vice president after Abraham Lincoln is assassinated. 13. How were the effects of the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850 similar? So the two compromises regarding slaves. A, they both permitted slavery in the North. B, they both included provisions for the return of escaped slaves to their owners. C, they both resolved disputes over whether to admit particular territories as new states. So for 14, we're looking for the factors contributing to the Civil War. So failure of the Missouri Compromise, failure of the Compromise of 1850, the decision of Dred Scott, and which of the following completes the table? The Lincoln-Douglas debates, B, admission of Oregon to the Union, or C, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. 15. What impact did Dred Scott v. Sanford have on life in the United States? E, it increased tensions between the North and the South. F, it peacefully resolved the conflict over the extension of slavery. H, it extends equal protection of the laws to African Americans. So we're looking for 16. On this chart, we're seeing where the first major battle of the Civil War took place on northern soils. The bloodiest single day of the Civil War, with Union casualties of 12,401 and Confederate casualties of 10,318. And then this battle stopped General Lee's invasion of the North and encouraged President Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. If you're paying attention, number 16 is B. All right, 17, Union tactics during the Civil War. Enforcement of embargo on Confederate goods, enforcement of naval blockade of the Confederate port. Why were these tactics effective? So why was the North doing these things? A, Confederate states were unable to collect tariffs on manufactured goods. B, Union forces were able to use the blockade to gain international support. C, Confederate states were unable to use agriculture exports as a source of revenue. So the book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, number 18, what was the impact of this novel? So the profits from the book sales funded major labor movements, A. C, the Supreme Court overturned fugitive slave laws. Or D, support grew for the abolitionist movement. (19) Again with the chart, north, south, and the west. The north had factories, numerous fast-flowing rivers. The south had plantations with the crops and the slaves. And what did the west have? 19. Which economy and contributing factor best completes this table? So did the west have B, cottage industry and a mild weather that attracted immigrants? C, mining with metal ores and minerals? Or D, ranching and railroads to transport cattle to the market? So remember what was going on in California. What rush? All right, number 20. Which region's primary economic activity in 1861 was growing cotton? So where was the cotton being grown in this diagram? We have A, 1 over in California, where there was the gold mines. C, 3 over here in the north, where there's factories. Or D, 4, where there's a bunch of land and crops could grow. Where were we growing cotton?